I never thought my own sister would destroy my life over money I had earned through 6 years of 18-hour workdays and ramen noodle dinners. The phone rang at 11:47 that Tuesday night, Jessica's voice cracking through the speaker like broken glass. $450,000. That's what she needed from my business savings account to cover her mortgage default. When I refused, she screamed that our father would disown me forever. Within 2 hours, I discovered she had been telling our entire family that I had already promised to pay, painting me as a liar who broke his word to family. Standing in my empty Chicago apartment with a one-way ticket to Prague, clutched in my trembling hand, I realized my entire world had crumbled because I wouldn't hand over money I had sacrificed everything to earn. 2 days passed before the real nightmare began. I should have known something was wrong when Jessica stopped calling after that initial midnight demand. The silence felt heavier than her desperate pleas had been. I tried focusing on work, debugging code for my latest client, but concentration eluded me completely. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach lurched with dread. Growing up in Toledo, Ohio, Jessica and I had been close despite the 5-year age gap. Our parents divorced when I turned 16, leaving both of us struggling to understand where we belonged in the wreckage. Dad moved across town, Mom relocated to Florida with her new boyfriend, and Jessica took on the role of surrogate parent, even though she was barely 21 herself. She helped me navigate college applications, drove me to job interviews, and celebrated when I landed my first programming gig at a small marketing firm. Building my software consulting business had consumed every waking moment for 6 years. While friends partied through their 20s, I worked weekends, skipped vacations, and lived in a studio apartment that barely qualified as habitable. $480,000 represented every sacrifice I had made, every social event I had missed, every relationship I had put on hold to build something meaningful. The money sat in high-yield savings accounts earning modest interest while I planned my next business expansion. Jessica had always struggled financially despite earning a marketing degree from Ohio State. She bounced between jobs, made impulsive purchases, and seemed incapable of saving money for more than a few weeks. When she bought the house in Dayton 3 years ago, I worried about her taking on such a large mortgage, but she assured me everything was manageable. Her daughter Emma, now 8 years old, deserved stability after watching her parents' messy divorce play out in court for 2 years. Wednesday morning brought a phone call that changed everything. A cheerful voice identified himself as Bradley Morrison from First National Lending, congratulating me on co-signing Jessica's mortgage refinance. My blood turned to ice as he explained the details of a $620,000 loan that apparently bore my signature and social security number. I had never signed anything. I had never even seen the paperwork. Racing to Jessica's house took 45 minutes through downtown traffic. She answered the door wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair unwashed, dark circles shadowing her green eyes. Emma sat at the kitchen table working on homework, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she practiced multiplication tables. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice level for Emma's sake. Jessica's face crumpled the moment we stepped into her living room. The story tumbled out in broken sentences punctuated by tears and desperate justifications. Online gambling had started innocently enough, just a few dollars on weekend poker games, but losses mounted, and she chased them with bigger bets, convinced that one lucky hand would solve all her problems. 2 years of secret addiction had drained her savings, maxed out her credit cards, and put her mortgage in jeopardy. "I used your business information because the bank knows you're successful," she sobbed, unable to meet my eyes. "I thought I could fix everything before you found out. I thought I could win enough to pay it back." The forged documents were sophisticated. She had practiced my signature hundreds of times, memorized my business details, and provided enough financial information to convince the lender that I was a willing co-signer. My credit score, my business income, my spotless financial history had all been leveraged without my knowledge to secure her refinancing. "Please don't tell Dad," she begged. "If he finds out about the gambling, he'll fight for custody of Emma. I can't lose her, too." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from our father, Robert. "Called 3 times. Why aren't you helping your sister? Family comes first." You told him I agreed to help, I asked, my voice rising despite Emma's presence in the next room. I had to say something. He was asking questions about the refinance, about how I qualified for such a large loan. I panicked and said you were co-signing. The phone rang before Jessica could explain further. Dad's voice boomed through the speaker, angry and disappointed in a way that transported me back to being 16 and failing algebra. I raised you better than this, Todd. Your sister is facing foreclosure and you're playing games with family loyalty. Sign the damned papers and stop being selfish. Dad, you don't understand what's happening here. I understand perfectly. You made a promise to your sister and now you're backing out because you're afraid of losing some money. Money you can always make more of. Family you can't replace. The line went dead before I could explain about the forged documents, the gambling addiction, or the fact that I had never made any promises. Jessica stared at her hands, tears dropping onto the coffee table that I recognized from our childhood home. That night alone in my apartment, I discovered the true scope of Jessica's deception. She had used my identity to open credit accounts, applied for business loans using my information, and created a web of financial obligations that could destroy my credit and my business. Account alerts flooded my email as I worked through the night documenting every unauthorized transaction and forged application. By morning, I realized that staying in Chicago would mean years of legal battles, damaged relationships, and constant financial threats. The one-way ticket to Prague represented more than escape. It meant survival. The next morning arrived with a phone call that revealed the true architect of my family's destruction. Patricia's voice carried the fake sweetness that had fooled my father for 3 years, but I heard the steel underneath as she began speaking. Todd, honey, we need to have a serious conversation about your responsibilities to this family. Patricia had married Dad 18 months after Mom's final departure to Florida. She brought homemade casseroles to his empty house, listened to his stories about the good old days, and slowly convinced him that she could fill the void Mom had left behind. At 52, she was 8 years younger than Dad, with silver-streaked auburn hair and the kind of practiced charm that made people trust her instantly. I've been watching your bank accounts through the access Jessica set up, she continued, as if monitoring my finances was perfectly normal. You have more than enough money to help your sister keep her home. Emma needs stability, and you're being incredibly selfish. The casual admission of financial surveillance hit me like a physical blow. Jessica had given Patricia access to my personal banking information, allowing her stepmother to track my spending, monitor my savings, and plan this entire manipulation campaign. You don't have the right to monitor my accounts, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I have every right to protect this family's interests. Your father works himself to the bone at that construction company, and Jessica is struggling as a single mother. You're sitting on nearly $500,000 while your own niece might lose her home. Patricia's voice shifted into the wounded tone she used whenever anyone questioned her motives. She painted herself as the family peacemaker, the woman who had brought love back into Dad's life after Mom's abandonment. But something in her voice revealed a deeper desperation than concern for Jessica's mortgage. Sign the papers, Todd, or face the consequences. Your father is prepared to cut you off completely if you don't step up and do the right thing. The conversation ended, but Patricia's threats echoed in my empty apartment. Within an hour, Dad's truck pulled into my parking lot, followed by Patricia's sedan and a third car I didn't recognize. Through my window, I watched Emma climb out of the back seat, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant and looking confused about why everyone seemed so upset. Dad's knock rattled my front door with barely controlled anger. When I opened it, his face showed the same disappointment I remembered from childhood mistakes, but magnified into something that felt like hatred. Patricia stood behind him, wearing a sympathetic expression that didn't reach her calculating blue eyes. Emma hugged my leg, unaware of the adult drama swirling around her innocent world. Uncle Todd, Mommy says you might help us keep our house, she said, looking up with the trusting smile that made my chest tighten with guilt. We're here to settle this once and for all, Dad announced, pushing past me into the living room. You're going to sign those mortgage papers, or you're going to explain to Emma why her uncle doesn't care if she becomes homeless. The emotional manipulation was surgical in its precision. Patricia had coached this entire scene using Emma's innocence as a weapon and Dad's protective instincts as ammunition. Jessica emerged from the kitchen where she had been hiding, her eyes red from crying, but her expression determined. "I told them everything," she said quietly, "about the gambling, about using your information, about all of it." But Dad's reaction proved that the truth had been filtered through Patricia's interpretation. In his version, I had initially agreed to help, then changed my mind out of greed. Jessica's gambling was portrayed as a temporary mistake that any loving family would support through. My refusal to honor my supposed commitment marked me as the villain in a story where everyone else was simply trying to survive. "Your business partner called this morning," Dad continued, his voice growing colder. "Seems like your clients are hearing stories about financial instability, questions about your character. Funny how word spreads when family loyalty breaks down." Danny's emergency call had come at 6 in the morning. 3 major clients had contacted him with concerns about my business practices, citing unnamed sources who had raised questions about my financial reliability. Contracts worth nearly $200,000 were being reconsidered, and Danny couldn't understand where the sudden doubts had originated. Patricia's satisfied smirk told me everything I needed to know. She had orchestrated not just the family pressure campaign, but a deliberate attack on my professional reputation. The message was clear: submit to her demands or watch everything I had built crumble around me. "You have 2 choices," Dad said, placing the mortgage documents on my coffee table. "Sign these papers and prove you're the man I raised you to be, or pack your bags and find a new family. Because this one won't be here when you come crawling back." Emma sat on my couch, coloring in a book Patricia had brought, humming softly, while the adults decided her future. The sight of her peaceful concentration while everything fell apart around us crystallized my decision. I couldn't sign documents that would destroy my financial future, but I also couldn't stay and watch this manipulation continue. The Prague ticket felt like salvation in my pocket. My friend Marcus had been asking me to visit his blockchain startup for months, describing the vibrant tech community and the freedom of building something new in a place where nobody knew my history. Escape meant leaving Emma, abandoning Jessica to Patricia's schemes, and accepting Dad's ultimatum. But staying meant signing away my future to appease people who saw my money as their solution. "I need time to think," I said finally. Patricia's eyes flashed with anger, but Dad nodded slowly. 24 hours, Todd. Then you make your choice, and we all live with the consequences." After they left, I sat in my empty apartment and booked the flight to Prague. By midnight, I had closed every financial account Jessica could access, transferred my assets to secure offshore holdings, and arranged for my business to operate remotely. If Patricia wanted to play financial warfare, she would discover that I had learned to protect myself. The plane ticket represented more than escape. It was my declaration of independence from a family that saw my success as their entitlement and my boundaries as betrayal. Prague welcomed me with cobblestone streets and Gothic architecture that made Chicago's concrete jungle feel like a distant nightmare. Marcus met me at Václav Havel Airport with his infectious grin and a bear hug that reminded me why our college friendship had survived 6 years of different time zones and career paths. "Finally decided to join the European tech revolution," he said, loading my single suitcase into his hybrid car. "Wait until you see what we're building." His blockchain startup occupied 3 floors of a renovated building in Vinohrady, where young programmers from 12 countries collaborated on projects that could reshape digital commerce. The energy reminded me of my early consulting days when every line of code felt like progress towards something meaningful. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without feeling like I was drowning in family drama. Marcus set me up in a furnished apartment 10 minutes from the office, complete with high-speed internet and a view of Wenceslas Square. The distance from Ohio felt like more than geography. It was emotional space to process everything that had happened and plan my next moves. My business could operate remotely, client relationships could be rebuilt, and Patricia's manipulation couldn't reach across an ocean. Working with Marcus's team on blockchain solutions energized me in ways I hadn't experienced since launching my first successful project. The technology promised to revolutionize how people secured their digital assets, ironically relevant, given my recent experience with financial betrayal. Czech programmers approach problems differently than their American counterparts, offering perspectives that challenged my usual methods and expanded my skill set. Prague's beauty amazed me daily. Morning walks along the Vltava River cleared my mind, while evening explorations of medieval streets provided perspective on problems that had seemed insurmountable in Chicago. The city's history of surviving invasions, revolutions, and political upheavals reminded me that personal crises could be endured and overcome. But peace proved temporary. After 1 week of relative calm, urgent messages began flooding my phone. Jessica's number appeared repeatedly in missed calls, followed by texts that grew increasingly frantic. Dad's messages were brief and angry, accusing me of abandoning family in their greatest time of need. Patricia's voicemails dripped with false concern about my mental state and legal threats about my obligations to family. The messages escalated Tuesday morning with news that made my blood freeze. Jessica had filed police reports claiming I had embezzled money from her business account, stolen funds meant for Emma's education, and fled the country to avoid prosecution. The false accusations painted me as a family member who had abused trust and stolen from his own niece. Wednesday afternoon brought a knock on my apartment door that shattered my sense of safety. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica standing in the hallway with Emma beside her, both looking exhausted from international travel. Jessica's eyes were red from crying, while Emma clutched her stuffed elephant and stared at the unfamiliar European architecture with wide-eyed confusion. "We need to talk," Jessica said when I opened the door, holding up an official-looking envelope. "And this time, there's no running away." The legal documents she carried were more sophisticated than I had expected. Court orders demanding my return to Ohio, extradition papers, filed through international channels, and financial judgments based on her false police reports. Patricia had somehow convinced authorities that I posed a flight risk with stolen family assets, creating legal complications that could trap me in a foreign country. Emma's presence complicated everything. She hugged my legs with innocent affection, asking why everyone seemed so sad and when we could go see the pretty castle she had spotted from the airport. Her trust in adult goodness made the surrounding legal drama feel even more twisted and wrong. "I never wanted any of this," Jessica said once Emma had settled on my couch with her coloring book. "Patricia convinced me that filing the reports would force you to come home and work things out. She said it was just paperwork to get your attention." The story that emerged was more disturbing than I had imagined. Patricia had threatened to turn Jessica in for identity theft unless she pursued international legal action against me. The gambling addiction was being used as leverage, with Patricia promising to protect Jessica from prosecution if she followed instructions exactly. "She has recordings of me admitting to forging your signature," Jessica whispered, glancing toward Emma to make sure she wasn't listening. "She says she'll give them to the police and child services unless I do exactly what she wants." But the most shocking revelation came when Jessica explained Patricia's real target. Our stepmother wasn't primarily interested in my money or Jessica's mortgage. She was methodically gaining access to Dad's retirement accounts, using our family crisis as justification for consolidating financial control. The mortgage scheme was designed to create emergencies that would require Dad to liquidate his savings and place them under Patricia's management. "She told me that Dad's late wife, your mom, had hidden money that rightfully belonged to the family," Jessica continued. "She said you inherited advantages that should have been shared, and it was time for everyone to get their fair share." The manipulation ran deeper than financial fraud. Patricia had been poisoning our family relationships for 3 years, planting seeds of resentment about perceived inequalities and unequal inheritances. She convinced Dad that I looked down on his construction work, told Jessica that I considered her a financial burden, and created narratives of family conflict where none had existed. Emma's innocent voice interrupted our whispered conversation. "Mommy, why did the policeman say we had to come find Uncle Todd? Did he do something bad?" The question revealed the most heartbreaking aspect of Patricia's scheme. Emma had witnessed police interviews, heard adult conversations about criminal charges, and traveled to a foreign country believing her uncle was some kind of fugitive. Her young mind was trying to process concepts like embezzlement and international law enforcement that no 8-year-old should understand. Jessica's phone buzzed with a message that drained color from her face. "Patricia knows we're here together. She's threatening to contact Czech authorities about harboring a fugitive." Before I could respond, authoritative knocking echoed through my apartment. Through the peephole, I saw 2 Czech police officers holding official documents and looking very serious about their mission. Patricia's threats had materialized into international law enforcement action, trapping us in a situation that could destroy everyone involved. Jessica grabbed Emma's hand while I stared at the door, realizing that escape had only led us into a more complex trap. Patricia's reach extended across oceans, and her manipulation had evolved from family pressure into criminal accusations that could land me in prison thousands of miles from home. The knocking continued, patient but insistent, while Emma asked why everyone looked so scared and whether the pretty policeman wanted to see her coloring book. The Czech officers spoke careful English as they explained the extradition request from Ohio authorities. Jessica's false reports had triggered international cooperation protocols, creating a legal nightmare that could take months to resolve through proper channels. While I hadn't technically violated Czech law, the accusations required investigation and potential deportation proceedings. Marcus arrived within an hour of my desperate phone call, bringing his lawyer friend Pavel and connections to Prague's underground tech community that operated in the shadows of traditional law enforcement. Pavel reviewed the documents with the practiced eye of someone who understood how international legal systems could be manipulated by people with enough determination and false documentation. "These charges are suspicious," Pavel said in accented but precise English. "Too coordinated, too detailed for genuine family dispute. Someone with legal knowledge helped prepare this paperwork." The safe house Marcus arranged occupied the basement of a building owned by a cryptocurrency collective that valued privacy above official cooperation. 3 floors above us, legitimate businesses operated normally, while underground servers processed transactions for clients who needed anonymity. My room contained a single bed, a powerful computer setup, and access to internet connections that couldn't be traced through conventional monitoring. Jessica and Emma stayed in a nearby hotel under false names, with Jessica maintaining contact with Patricia while secretly feeding me information about the continuing scheme. The stress of deception was wearing on Jessica's already fragile emotional state, but fear of losing Emma kept her cooperating with Patricia's increasingly desperate demands. Working 18-hour days from the underground facility, I began investigating Patricia's background using techniques that bordered on illegal but fell within the gray areas of international cybersecurity research. Her social media presence revealed inconsistencies in her personal history, gaps in employment that didn't match her explanations to Dad, and financial activity that suggested income sources beyond her stated part-time administrative job. The breakthrough came when I discovered that Patricia Johnson wasn't her real name. Martha Patterson had been using variations of her identity for 6 years, moving between states and targeting widowed men with adult children and substantial assets. Public records showed a pattern of marriages followed by financial crises, family conflicts, and mysterious disappearances that coincided with cleaned-out bank accounts. Her previous victims included a retired teacher in Arizona, whose adult daughter still believed Martha had saved the family from financial ruin, a small business owner in Nevada, whose sons never spoke to him again after Martha convinced him they were stealing from his company, and a farmer in Iowa whose children discovered the truth only after their father's funeral. Each case followed the same template: gain the father's trust, create conflicts with adult children, manufacture financial emergencies, then disappear with liquid assets. Jessica's secret recordings provided crucial evidence of Patricia's methods. The audio files captured Patricia coaching Jessica on exactly what to tell police, how to present the evidence of my supposed crimes, and when to escalate pressure by involving Emma in the emotional manipulation. Patricia's voice carried the confidence of someone who had refined these techniques through multiple successful operations. "Your father trusts me completely now," Patricia said in one recording. "He'll sign anything I put in front of him if he thinks it's protecting you and Emma from Todd's selfishness. By Christmas, I'll have access to his retirement accounts, his life insurance policies, and the deed to his house." But the most shocking discovery came when I traced Martha Patterson's connection to our family history. She hadn't randomly selected Dad as a target. 6 years ago, she had worked for the accounting firm that handled Mom's estate settlement, gaining access to financial information about Dad's assets, his emotional vulnerabilities following the divorce, and his relationships with his adult children. Martha had been planning this operation since before she ever met Dad socially. She studied our family dynamics, identified pressure points, and waited for the right moment to insert herself into his life as the solution to loneliness that Mom's departure had created. Every casserole, every sympathetic conversation, every gesture of romantic interest had been calculated to gain his trust and position herself for financial exploitation. Emma's presence in Prague was the most heartbreaking element of Patricia's manipulation. The 8-year-old had been coached to repeat specific phrases about Uncle Todd's selfishness, trained to cry on cue when discussing the possibility of losing her home, and rewarded with treats and toys for performing her role in the emotional manipulation. She genuinely loved me, but had been taught that love meant making me feel guilty enough to surrender my money. Working with Jessica to document everything, I created an encrypted archive of evidence that could expose Patricia's entire operation. Bank records, voice recordings, background checks, and communication logs painted a picture of systematic fraud that spanned multiple states and destroyed several families. The evidence was comprehensive enough to support criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and recovery of stolen assets. But Patricia's paranoia proved as sophisticated as her manipulation tactics. Jessica's nervousness during phone calls had aroused suspicion, and Patricia's demands for constant location updates suggested she suspected our cooperation. By the end of the week, Jessica received an ultimatum that forced our investigation into higher gear. "You have 48 hours to convince Todd to return voluntarily, or I'll contact Czech Child Services about Emma's situation," Patricia threatened during their Friday night phone call. International law enforcement takes child endangerment very seriously, and I have documentation about Todd's history of financial crimes against family members. The threat to remove Emma from Jessica's custody represented Patricia's most vicious escalation yet. She was prepared to destroy an innocent child's life to maintain control of her operation and access to Dad's retirement funds. The timeline for our counterattack had just shortened from months to hours. Marcus and Pavel worked through the weekend to prepare legal documents that would reverse Patricia's accusations and present our evidence to authorities in both countries simultaneously. But we needed more than evidence to protect Emma and expose Patricia's operation before she could disappear with Dad's assets. The solution required turning Patricia's own greed against her using the same manipulation tactics she had perfected against our family. Creating the perfect trap for Patricia required understanding her psychology as thoroughly as she had studied our family's vulnerabilities. Her pattern of targeting older men with substantial assets revealed an opportunistic mindset, driven by immediate gratification rather than long-term planning. She moved from victim to victim, quickly suggesting impatience with elaborate schemes that required extended commitment. Working with Marcus's blockchain team, I designed a cryptocurrency investment opportunity specifically tailored to Patricia's demonstrated weaknesses. The fake venture promised 400% returns within 6 months through revolutionary smart contracts that automated international currency arbitrage. The technical details were sophisticated enough to convince someone with limited financial knowledge, while offering returns that would appeal to her greedy nature. Jessica's performance as a desperate daughter became crucial to selling the deception. She returned to Ohio while I monitored every conversation through encrypted communication systems, coaching her responses and monitoring Patricia's reactions to our carefully planted information. The stress of maintaining her cover story while protecting Emma required acting skills that Jessica had never known she possessed. Todd contacted me from Prague, Jessica told Patricia during their Monday morning meeting, following a script we had rehearsed dozens of times. He's found some kind of European investment that could solve all our problems, but he wants guarantees that the family will forgive him before he shares the details. Patricia's interest was immediate and predictable. She pressed Jessica for specifics about my supposed European business contacts, the nature of the investment opportunity, and most importantly, the minimum investment required to participate. Every question revealed her growing excitement about accessing what she believed was a new source of wealth. The key to the manipulation was making Patricia believe she was discovering the opportunity rather than being offered it. Jessica expressed skepticism about cryptocurrency investments, claimed ignorance about international finance, and repeatedly mentioned that Dad would never approve of such risky ventures. Her apparent reluctance made Patricia more determined to learn details and convinced her that she was exploiting Jessica's naivete rather than walking into a trap. "Your father doesn't need to know about every investment decision," Patricia told Jessica during Wednesday's recorded conversation. "If Todd's European connection can generate the kind of returns you're describing, I can arrange for Robert's retirement fund to participate without worrying him with complicated details." But Dad's growing suspicions began undermining Patricia's confidence in her control over the situation. 3 years of marriage had given him time to observe her behavior patterns, and recent events had raised questions about her background that he couldn't ignore. His decision to hire a private investigator represented the first crack in Patricia's carefully constructed facade. "Robert's been asking uncomfortable questions about my previous marriages," Patricia admitted to Jessica during a phone call that revealed her mounting paranoia. "He found some old documents that don't match what I've told him about my past, and he's threatening to contact my ex-husband's family for references." The private investigator Dad hired was a retired police detective named Frank Sullivan, who specialized in financial fraud cases. His preliminary report confirmed basic facts about Martha Patterson's identity, her criminal background in other states, and the suspicious pattern of marriages that ended with missing assets and broken families. Dad's reaction to learning about Patricia's true identity was exactly what we had hoped for, but more emotionally devastating than I had anticipated. Jessica's secret recording captured the moment Dad confronted Patricia with Frank's evidence. His voice carried the same betrayal and disappointment I remembered from childhood, but magnified into something that sounded like his heart breaking in real time. 3 years. He whispered the words barely audible through Jessica's hidden microphone. 3 years of believing I had found someone who actually cared about me, when all you wanted was access to my money. Patricia's response revealed the cold calculation beneath her practiced charm. She didn't deny the accusations or attempt to justify her deception. Instead, she shifted into damage control mode, threatening to disappear with the $80,000 she had already transferred from Dad's savings account unless he agreed to remain silent about her true identity. "You'll never see that money again if you contact the police," she said with chilling matter-of-factness. "And I'll make sure Jessica faces prosecution for identity theft and fraud. Your choice, Robert. Let me leave quietly, or watch your family destroy itself in court battles that could take years." But Patricia underestimated both Dad's integrity and our preparation for exactly this scenario. The evidence I had compiled from Prague included documentation of every transaction she had made, using Dad's financial information, complete records of her previous operations in other states, and testimony from other victims who were eager to see justice served. Jessica's role in the final confrontation required her to maintain her cover until the last possible moment. She convinced Patricia that Dad's detective was incompetent, that the evidence was circumstantial, and that my cryptocurrency investment could still provide enough money for everyone to disappear quietly. Patricia's greed overcame her caution, leading her to demand details about transferring Dad's entire retirement fund into the fake investment. "If we move quickly, Robert will never know what happened," Patricia told Jessica during their final recorded conversation. By the time he realizes the money is gone, we'll be far enough away that it doesn't matter. And Todd's European connection will have made us all wealthy enough to start fresh somewhere else. The moment Patricia attempted to access Dad's retirement accounts online, our trap snapped shut. Every login attempt was recorded. Her location was traced, and her computer activity provided real-time evidence of attempted theft. The cryptocurrency investment she believed would make her wealthy was actually a sophisticated monitoring system that documented every aspect of her criminal behavior. Local police arrived at Dad's house while Patricia was still logged into his retirement account, caught in the act of attempting to transfer funds to offshore accounts we had set up to trace her money laundering operation. Her laptop contained evidence of communications with money launderers, fake identity documents, and detailed plans for her next target in Colorado. Jessica's transformation from victim to undercover investigator had provided more than evidence against Patricia. The experience of fighting back against manipulation had restored her confidence and demonstrated capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. Her decision to enter gambling addiction treatment was genuine and voluntary, motivated by determination to build the stable life Emma deserved, rather than fear of losing custody. But the most satisfying moment came when Dad called to apologize for doubting my character and believing Patricia's manipulation. His voice carried the same warmth I remembered from childhood bedtime stories before divorce, and disappointment had taught him to suspect everyone's motives. "I should have trusted my own son instead of a woman who was playing me for a fool," he said during our video call from Prague. "You tried to protect this family, and I almost destroyed it by choosing the wrong person to believe." Patricia's arrest by federal agents eliminated any possibility of escape or continued manipulation. The charges included wire fraud, money laundering, elder abuse, and identity theft across multiple states. Her victims in Arizona, Nevada, and Iowa would finally see justice, and her pattern of financial predation was permanently ended. From my Prague apartment, I watched Jessica and Dad rebuild their relationship on foundation of honesty, rather than manipulation. Emma's confusion about the adult drama was gently resolved through age-appropriate explanations that emphasized love, trust, and the importance of telling the truth. The family that Patricia had nearly destroyed was emerging stronger than it had been before her arrival. My return to Ohio came 6 weeks after Patricia's arrest, when legal complications had been resolved and the immediate crisis had passed. The flight from Prague felt different than my desperate escape 2 months earlier, carrying hope instead of desperation and anticipation, rather than dread about what awaited me at home. Dad met me at Cleveland Hopkins Airport wearing a smile that reminded me of childhood memories before divorce, and disappointment had hardened his features. The past months had aged him, but Patricia's removal from his life had restored something essential that her manipulation had stolen. His hug felt genuine in ways that 3 years of family gatherings with Patricia had never achieved. "Your sister's doing well," he said during the drive to Toledo. "The treatment program is helping her understand how the gambling started and giving her tools to stay clean." Emma's proud of her mom for being brave enough to get help. Jessica's progress exceeded my expectations when we met for dinner at the small Italian restaurant where we used to celebrate birthdays as children. Her eyes were clear, her voice was steady, and her conversation focused on future plans rather than past regrets. Gambling addiction treatment had provided more than abstinence. It had given her insight into the emotional vulnerabilities that Patricia had exploited so effectively. "I kept thinking I could fix everything with one lucky bet," she explained while Emma colored pictures at a nearby table. Patricia understood that desperation and used it to control me. She made me believe that depending on your success meant I was a failure as a mother and a daughter. But Patricia's legal troubles were far from over. The federal investigation had uncovered additional victims across 7 states with total losses exceeding $2 million over 8 years. Her systematic approach to financial predation had destroyed multiple families, leaving elderly men isolated from their children and convinced that their own families had betrayed them. The preliminary hearing revealed Patricia's operation in disturbing detail. She maintained detailed files on potential targets, including psychological profiles, financial assessments, and family relationship analyses. Her selection criteria prioritized recently divorced or widowed men with substantial assets and adult children who lived far enough away to make monitoring difficult. My testimony to federal investigators lasted 6 hours, covering everything from the forged mortgage documents to the international extradition attempts. The blockchain evidence I had compiled from Prague provided irrefutable documentation of her money laundering activities, while Jessica's recordings captured her confessing to methods she had used against previous victims. But legal justice moved slowly, while Patricia's victims struggled with ongoing financial and emotional damage. The Arizona teacher's daughter still refused to speak to her father, convinced that his defense of Martha had proven his preference for his new wife over his children. The Nevada businessman's sons continued believing their father had stolen from his own company, unaware that Martha had planted evidence and coached witness statements that supported false accusations. Emma's resilience amazed everyone who met her. Despite witnessing police arrests, international travel, and adult conversations about criminal behavior, she maintained the optimistic innocence that made her such a powerful weapon in Patricia's manipulation scheme. Her recovery from trauma involved art therapy, play sessions with child psychologists, and patient conversations about the difference between adult problems and children's responsibilities. "I drew a picture of our family," she announced during Sunday dinner at Dad's house, presenting a crayon masterpiece that showed stick figures holding hands outside a small blue house. "Uncle Todd is back from his adventure. Mommy doesn't look sad anymore, and Grandpa Robert is smiling because the mean lady is gone." But Patricia's influence on our family relationships required more than her physical absence to fully heal. 3 years of manipulation had created suspicions, resentments, and communication patterns that took conscious effort to recognize and change. Dad's tendency to isolate during stressful periods, Jessica's habit of hiding problems until they became crises, and my inclination to solve everything through financial means all needed examination and adjustment. Family therapy sessions helped us understand how Patricia had identified and exploited these existing vulnerabilities. Her success had depended not just on her manipulation skills, but on our willingness to believe narratives that confirmed our existing fears about each other's motivations and priorities. "She told each of you exactly what you were already afraid the others believed," our therapist explained during one particularly revealing session. Robert feared his children saw him as a burden. Jessica worried that Todd considered her a failure, and Todd believed his family only valued his money. Patricia simply amplified those fears until they felt like confirmed truths. The cryptocurrency investment that had trapped Patricia generated unexpected real profits when Marcus's Prague team decided to implement the blockchain concepts we had developed as cover for the operation. The irony of creating actual wealth through a fake investment designed to catch a financial predator wasn't lost on any of us, and the proceeds provided funding for a victim assistance program that helped other families targeted by similar schemes. But the most meaningful confrontation came during Patricia's sentencing hearing, when several of her previous victims testified about the lasting damage her manipulation had caused to their families. The Arizona teacher's son flew in from California to speak about his father's isolation and the ongoing estrangement that Martha's schemes had created. "She didn't just steal money," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "She stole our family relationships, our trust in each other, and our ability to believe that the people we love have good intentions. The financial losses can be recovered, but some of the emotional damage may be permanent." Patricia showed no remorse during the proceedings, maintaining the same cold calculation that had characterized her response to being caught. She pled guilty to federal charges in exchange for a reduced sentence, but refused to provide information about additional victims or hidden assets that could be recovered for restitution. The judge's sentence of 15 years in federal prison felt appropriate, but insufficient given the scope of damage Patricia had caused across multiple families. Her systematic approach to emotional and financial manipulation had destroyed relationships that might never be fully repaired, regardless of how much money was eventually recovered. Jessica's final act of courage came when she testified about the identity theft and forgery charges that could have sent her to prison alongside Patricia. Her honest account of being manipulated and threatened into criminal behavior demonstrated the psychological control that financial predators could exercise over their victims' family members. "I thought I was protecting my daughter and saving my family," she said through tears. "I never understood that the person I was trying to please was actually destroying everything I was trying to save." The prosecutor's decision not to pursue charges against Jessica recognized both her cooperation in the investigation and her status as a victim, rather than a willing participant in Patricia's schemes. The gambling addiction treatment she had completed voluntarily, combined with restitution she was making from her own resources, convinced authorities that rehabilitation had already occurred. Emma's presence at the final hearing provided the most powerful reminder of what Patricia's manipulation had really threatened. The 8-year-old sat between Jessica and Dad, coloring in her activity book, while lawyers discussed complex legal concepts that could have separated her from the family members who loved her most. When the judge announced Patricia's sentence, Emma looked up from her coloring and asked in a voice that carried throughout the courtroom, "Does this mean the mean lady can't hurt our family anymore?" The question crystallized everything we had fought to protect, and everything we had nearly lost to one person's calculated greed. 6 months later, our family gathered for Christmas dinner in Dad's house, which felt different without Patricia's presence, but similar to holidays from my childhood before divorce, and disappointment had complicated our relationships. Emma helped Dad cook his famous prime rib, while Jessica arranged flowers she had grown in her new apartment's small garden. The normalcy felt precious after months of legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and the slow work of rebuilding trust. My decision to return from Prague permanently had surprised Marcus, who offered me a partnership in his expanding blockchain company if I would stay in Europe. The opportunity was tempting, and Prague had provided sanctuary when my own country felt like enemy territory. But the crisis with Patricia had taught me that running away from family problems usually created more complications than staying to address them directly. The international consulting business I had developed during my Prague exile was thriving beyond my original expectations. Working with European tech companies had connected me to projects that challenged my abilities and expanded my professional network in ways that staying in Chicago never could have achieved. The irony of Patricia's manipulation driving me toward opportunities that improved my career wasn't lost on anyone who knew the full story. Jessica's transformation was the most remarkable change in our family dynamic. Gambling addiction treatment had provided more than abstinence from destructive behaviors. It had given her insight into the emotional patterns that made her vulnerable to manipulation and tools for building healthier relationships with money risk and family obligations. "I spent so many years feeling like I owed everyone something," she reflected during one of our weekly coffee meetings. Patricia understood that guilt and used it to control everything I did. Now, I'm learning the difference between helping family and enabling manipulation. Her new job at a nonprofit organization that helped families recover from financial fraud felt like perfect alignment between her personal experience and professional goals. The marketing skills that had been underutilized in previous positions found meaningful application in creating educational materials about financial predators and their tactics. Her firsthand knowledge of how manipulation worked made her an effective advocate for other victims. Emma's resilience continued to amaze everyone involved in her recovery process. Child psychologists had worried about lasting trauma from witnessing adult criminal behavior, international travel during family crisis, and the emotional manipulation she had unknowingly participated in. But 8-year-old adaptability proved stronger than adult fears about psychological damage. "I'm learning programming from Uncle Todd," she announced proudly during Christmas dinner, demonstrating the basic coding concepts I had been teaching her through games and puzzles. "Maybe I'll visit Prague someday and see the pretty castle and meet Marcus and all the nice computer people." Her innocent enthusiasm for technology and travel represented hope that Patricia's manipulation hadn't poisoned her trust in adult intentions or her curiosity about the world beyond Ohio. The Prague adventure that had begun as my desperate escape might someday become a positive destination for family visits and cultural exchange. Dad's recovery from Patricia's betrayal had required confronting uncomfortable truths about his loneliness after Mom's departure, and his willingness to ignore warning signs when someone offered the companionship he desperately wanted. The private investigator who had exposed Patricia's true identity became an unexpected friend who understood the challenges of rebuilding trust after systematic deception. I thought I was too smart to be fooled by someone like that. Dad admitted during one of our father-son conversations that had become regular since Patricia's arrest. But she studied me for months before making her move, learning exactly what I needed to hear, and when I was most vulnerable to believing it, his decision to sell the house where he had lived with Patricia and move closer to both Jessica and me reflected more than practical convenience. The fresh start represented emotional distance from manipulation and proximity to family relationships based on honesty rather than calculated exploitation. The nonprofit organization I established with profits from the Prague blockchain project was helping other families targeted by financial predators like Patricia. The fund provided legal assistance, investigation services, and family counseling for victims who couldn't afford professional help in fighting systematic manipulation. Emma's suggestion that we call it the Truth Helper Project became the official name after no one could think of anything better. Working with federal investigators to identify and assist Patricia's other victims had revealed the true scope of damage that one skilled manipulator could inflict across multiple families and several years. The Arizona teacher's family was slowly rebuilding their relationship through mediated conversations and shared grief over their father's isolation. The Nevada businessman's sons were learning about the evidence Patricia had planted to convince them their father was stealing from his company. But some relationships might never fully recover from the suspicion and resentment that Patricia had carefully cultivated. Her manipulation had been most effective when it confirmed existing family tensions and amplified natural conflicts into seemingly irreconcilable differences. The families that survived her schemes were those that chose forgiveness over vindication and understanding over blame. Jessica's decision to pursue a master's degree in counseling psychology represented her commitment to helping other families recognize and resist financial manipulation. Her personal experience with addiction, identity theft, and emotional manipulation would eventually become professional qualifications for helping others navigate similar crises. "I want to be the person I needed when Patricia was controlling my life," she said during her graduate school application process. "Someone who understands how manipulation works and can help families recognize it before relationships are destroyed." The legal case against Patricia had established precedents for prosecuting complex financial manipulation schemes that crossed state lines and involved multiple forms of fraud. Her 15-year sentence was among the longest ever imposed for elder financial abuse, and her case was being studied by law enforcement agencies as a model for investigating similar operations. Christmas dinner conversation avoided dwelling on Patricia's manipulation, focusing instead on Emma's school achievements, Jessica's graduate program, Dad's retirement planning, and my expanding international business relationships. The ordinary family discussions felt extraordinary after months of legal drama and emotional crisis. Emma's bedtime story request that evening was for tales about my Prague adventures, which had been transformed in her imagination from desperate escape to heroic quest. Her version of events included brave knights helping Uncle Todd defeat evil dragons and save the family treasure, complete with happy endings and moral lessons about truth defeating deception. "Will you teach me Czech language so I can talk to Marcus and visit the pretty castle?" she asked while I tucked her into the guest bed at Dad's house. "Would you like to learn about other countries and maybe travel when you're older?" "Šťastný. I want to see everywhere Uncle Todd has been and meet all the nice people who helped our family when things were scary." Her innocent question crystallized the most important lesson from our entire ordeal. Real security hadn't come from the money I had saved through years of sacrifice and careful planning. Financial resources had provided options and opportunities, but protection had ultimately depended on relationships built through trust, communication, and mutual support. Patricia's manipulation had been most successful when our family was isolated from each other, operating on assumptions rather than honest conversation, and prioritizing individual security over collective well-being. Her defeat had required cooperation, shared information, and willingness to risk individual comfort for family protection. The $480,000 I had fought so hard to protect was growing through smart investments and international business opportunities that my Prague experience had created. But wealth no longer felt like the most important measure of success or security. Emma's laughter, Jessica's recovery, Dad's renewed trust, and our family's stronger relationships represented riches that no financial predator could steal or manipulate. Standing in Dad's kitchen after Emma had fallen asleep, washing dishes, while Jessica and Dad planned our upcoming vacation to visit Marcus in Prague, I realized that losing everything had forced me to discover what truly mattered. The crisis that had begun with Patricia's midnight demand for money had ended with a family more honest, more connected, and more resilient than we had ever been before. Money could be earned, saved, and invested, but family relationships required daily attention, honest communication, and commitment to understanding each other's perspectives and motivations. Patricia's greatest failure had been underestimating our capacity to choose love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, and truth over comfortable deception. The Prague ticket that had represented escape had ultimately led me home to a family that was worth every sacrifice, every sleepless night of legal preparation, and every moment of fear about uncertain outcomes. Emma's innocent trust, Jessica's courageous recovery, and Dad's renewed warmth reminded me daily that some treasures are measured in hugs rather than dollars. As I finished the last of the Christmas dishes, I reflected on how the most valuable lesson from our ordeal hadn't come from financial planning or legal strategy, but from 8-year-old Emma's simple question about whether the mean lady could hurt our family anymore. The answer was no, because we had learned to protect what mattered most through honest communication, mutual support, and unwavering commitment to each other's well-being. If your family ever faces financial manipulation or pressure from someone who claims to have your best interests at heart, remember that real love doesn't demand financial sacrifice as proof of loyalty. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Communicate honestly with the people who matter most, and never let anyone convince you that protecting your boundaries means abandoning your family. Have you ever experienced manipulation from someone who seemed to care about your family but actually had hidden motives? Share your story in the comments below and help others recognize the warning signs before relationships are damaged. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to hear more real-life stories about overcoming family crises, and share this with anyone who might benefit from learning about financial manipulation tactics. Thank you for listening to my family's journey from betrayal to healing, and I wish you the courage to protect both your relationships and your financial security with equal determination.